All right, good morning everyone. I'm Chad Prather. I'm Community President for Huntington Bank here at Morgantown. I've got the great fortune of chairing the Board of Directors for the Chamber of Commerce this year as well. Before we get started, I wanted to first and foremost, while she's in the room, Kimberly Thompson, I want to thank you and the hotel for hosting us this morning. Thanks so much. Beautiful facility, unbelievable view, so anybody who has events, if you want to host things, this is a great place to do it. We have a lot of things to Chamber here, and they do a wonderful job. And also, just very quickly, I know there's a few folks in the room on the Board of Directors. If you're on the board currently for the Morgantown Area Chamber, if you could stand and just be recognized very quickly. Susan and Mark, thank you guys. Appreciate you being here. This event this morning, obviously, is a legislative wrap-up. It was an interesting session, I think, to maybe say the least, and we'll hear from our elected officials here shortly and look forward to doing that. This is put on by our Government Affairs Committee, so I'd like to also recognize our Government Affairs Committee. If you're on that committee, if you wouldn't mind standing up for a moment, being recognized as well. Chaired by these two folks here. Thank you so much, all of you. Again, interesting session this year. We're going to hear from each of our elected officials. We're going to go ahead and allow them to introduce themselves here momentarily, but if you would, these folks, they put themselves out there. They spend a lot of time representing us, representing the interests of our county and our area. So before we get started, can we go ahead and give them a round of applause and thank them for this. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up then and turn it over to Ashley. We'll allow everyone to introduce themselves, have a few opening comments, and we'd like to have this as interactive as possible. So if you have some questions and some thoughts that you'd like to get out on the table, start thinking of those, and certainly ask our elected officials. So again, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you. Hello, my name is Hardesty, Odell. I'm a lawyer here in town for Bowles-Rice. I am the co-chair for the Government Affairs Committee for the Chamber of Commerce, and I am assisted by my lovely friend and colleague, Jack Thompson, who is with WVU.
I am lovely.
You are lovely. You are lovely. And I want to echo Chad's comments and welcome to you this morning, and our gratitude to all of our legislators for being here today. This is an important event that the Government Affairs Committee hosts every year to give the business community in the greater Morgantown area the opportunity to interact and have conversation with the elected officials that we send to Charleston every year. So we have given our legislators heads up on some issues that we think are on the hearts and minds of the business community here in Morgantown. So we will get to those questions at the end, but I do want to give each of our delegates an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell us which district they represent, and talk a little bit about any initiatives that you conquered or took on during this session. The budget was, I think, one that we all followed, but if there was anything that you specifically want to talk about that you championed this session and would like your constituents to know about, please take the opportunity to do that. We'll give each legislator 2 minutes. We are the taskmasters up here. We do not mean to be rude if we start pacing and kind of looking at you, like wrap it up.
I won't be lovely.
But we do want to make sure that we have enough time for our members to ask questions of you. So we will try to keep it to 2 minutes each. I am open to whoever wants to start. We can start on the ends or in the middle. I'll start. Okay. Okay. All right. Delegate Amy Summers.
Yeah, Amy Summers, District 49, which for the Morgantown area that is out by Platesville and Halleck Road. I have a precinct out there. Their main concern is getting their roads paved, so it's a little different than what your concerns are here right in the city. It was an interesting session to say the least. It's the third session, or the third year that I've been there, and I was a little disappointed that the only thing that was really talked about was the budget and the controversy over the budget. So a lot of great bills that went through kind of were put on the back burner and not really talked about. As Vice Chairman of the Health Committee, most of the bills that I address have to do with health care and health-related issues, our drug problem in the area. I'm also on the Judiciary Committee where we rehear all those bills for a second time. And then I'm on agriculture and political subdivisions. Instead of me just spieling to you what would be more beneficial to me as a legislator is to hear things that we passed that affected you or didn't affect you, what you liked about them, what you didn't. What you're finding in the business community that is hindering what you're doing, that's unnecessary, that we could change, that would be more beneficial to me. I'll address any bills that we've talked about that you'd like to, but from a business standpoint, one of the most beneficial, I think, maybe not in Morgantown, I'm not sure, but was our broadband bill where we're trying to expand broadband throughout the state.
Okay, my name is Barbara Evans-Fleischhauer. I know most of you in here because I've been around a long time. I have been in the House of Delegates 21 years, and I serve, like Amy, on Judiciary and Health. I'm the minority chair of Judiciary this year. Amy's right. It seemed like everything was preoccupied with the budget, and as it should have been. I mean, that was a really, really big issue. And we have a difference in philosophy, although many of us work together. You know, many of the Democrats wanted to do more investment in our state, and some people agreed on that roads are number one. And actually, Amy, you've never been to my house, or you would know about the roads. So that's one good thing that happened, was the passage of legislation to support the road bond. To me, that's the number one issue in our community. On the flip side of that, WVU had an $8.7 million cut. That is very hard for everyone in our community. It will mean job losses probably, and it will mean losses to businesses, because that's our economic engine. And so we had a bare bones budget. There were many cuts that were made, and some of those we're going to feel as we move along. On the other hand, there were pieces of legislation that I think were important that passed, and some of them were big surprises, like the medical marijuana bill. That I think was supported by a lot of people around the state, both Republicans and Democrats. Also, the second chance for employment bill, which would be a pathway for people who've committed a felony to have that not completely taken off their record, but it would be reduced to a misdemeanor. And that's one of the first things that, okay. The last thing I want to mention is human trafficking, and that's something that Amy and I worked on for several years, and many people worked on for 7 years. It had passed 3 times, and finally this year we got it through, and I was happy about that.
Thank you.
I'm Dave Pethel. I represent the 5th Delegate District, which is all of Wetzel and 1 precinct in the western part of Monongalia County. As previous legislators have said, the main focus was on getting the budget. I actually supported the budget. At the end, I wasn't happy with it. I wasn't happy with all the cuts, especially to higher education. I supported it because I felt like that was better than shutting down the government. Personally, I believe that we needed more revenue to help fund the services that people, want in this state. One of the things, I was on the conference committee out of House Finance to try to get a revenue bill. It was House Bill 107. And this bill would have actually broadened the base. We ended up, the conference committee had to have a majority on each of the Senate, and also a majority of the House members were on that conference committee. It was 5 from each side. All 5 members on the House side supported the conference committee, voted for it. 2 senators, Senator Prezioso and Senator Jeffries, supported it, but we couldn't get the 3rd person to support it, so we ended up not having a bill there, to vote on. Governor Justice had said to us he had late in the session and even in the special session,
2 minutes, sir.
his plan which I ended up actually supporting at the end, but we couldn't get enough votes to pass it, so we ended up with the budget with all cuts. Thank you.
Well, good morning. I'm going to remain seated because it's a small room, and I'm sure you can see all of us adequately. First, let me say that Senator Prezioso sends his best. Obviously, things are changing in Charleston right now. He's trying to stay on top of it, so that's where he's at this morning, is in Charleston, trying just to follow up some of those news stories that we're all hearing on a hourly basis. I also want to thank you for this event. What many of you don't realize is this is about the only time we get to see each other, is when you guys bring us all together here to meet with you and discuss some of the issues. I look forward to your questions this morning more than anything. We'll go through these issues that you have on this piece of paper in front of us, the 4 or 5 issues, and then I really look forward to your follow-ups to that. In regards to issues that I worked on, there was one primary issue that I worked on, and maybe folks will think in 60 days you only worked on one issue. Well, this is one of great concern to me, and that was in the governor's budget. He was trying to dispose of WebNet here in Montague County, and Barbara and I both together have worked for many years trying to keep WebNet here in our community. That's between 60 and 70 employees that have full-time job benefits and everything. And they do a lot for our community, do a lot for the state that folks don't realize. They just quietly go along doing their business. But they're the ones who keep our public community colleges open. They're the one who keeps our community libraries open and our libraries in our public school system. So there's a lot going on there. Without them, we can't attract grants into the community for the state to benefit from. We'd be paying full price on a lot of technology on our campuses. And again, WebNet allows us to get a reduced rate of almost 80% in some cases on these grants and these proposals on technology packages. So it's very important to me, and again, Barbara and I have worked on this since, 2001. It seems like every administration that comes in wants to take advantage and try and take it away. Why? Because it's a very efficient organization, and they do a very fine job of providing technology in our community. So we're always on the lookout to make sure that that's not going to happen again. We're going to do our best to make sure that WebNet stays in the community. WebNet's a target simply because WebNet's a target simply because of its location, and if you could move them out of there, something else would drop in. But we can't consolidate it into the Office of Technology. It just won't work. Thank you.
I'm Senator Charles Clements from New Martinsville. I represent either the first or second largest district in the state, consisting of all or parts of 9 counties. So I get to see a lot of the state in this district. And I was appointed to fill the seat vacated by Agricultural Commissioner Leonhardt. So I got into the system a little bit late, but there's a couple of items that were dear to my heart and we worked on. First of all, the road bond issue. As Tom Witt can probably tell you, infrastructure is my cup of tea. I have worked for several years as executive director for the Route 2 Interstate 68 Authority to try to get our highways done. And also, the other part of the legislation that I was very active in is the natural gas legislation. If you look at the district, my second district, that is the gas district in West Virginia. And maybe you have not seen what it is doing in Montague County, at least in the Morgantown area. But when you go into the rural parts of Doddridge County, Ritchie County, Wetzel, Tyler, and Marshall counties, it's the predominant thing that you see now. And it's very important that we have good legislation to try to make sure that the people of West Virginia are protected and that our state will grow. I feel the natural gas development in this state is probably the biggest thing that's happened in this state in many, many years. And the potential for this cracker plant to be built in Ohio, just across the bridge from Moundsville, can produce many, many, many downstream jobs for the people here in West Virginia. So I look forward to seeing the growth in this part of the state, and thank you for having me here. Morgantown is a star in the state. It really shines out. It's a wonderful community and a wonderful town. Thank you for having us today.
Good morning. I'm Cindy Fridge, and I represent the 51st District. I serve on the House Finance Committee. I'm chair of banking in the House. I'm vice chair of Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, which deals with regulations. I serve on the Select Committee for Labor Issues and Worker Safety Issues, and on the Select Committee for Substance Abuse. And if you listened in on the Finance Committee meetings in the House, you would have heard me constantly fighting for WVU and fighting for WevNet. And I did a lot of work behind the scenes as well, but I mean, unfortunately I had to really fight hard for WVU to be cut less than they were initially. And the governor, when he introduced his bill, 25%, he increased spending in the bill, even though we're in a budget crisis, there's been a war on coal, there was increased spending in the budget, yet 25% of his proposed cuts really, I felt, came out of Montague County, WVU, WevNet, and other things. But to be fair, when I include WVU, I'm including the Parkersburg and the other extensions in that. But that was a big cut of the budget cuts were coming out of my district, here, us. So I fought for that, and I fought all year for appropriate cuts because I knew it was coming to us. So I fought to cut wasteful spending, to cut other things that we shouldn't be funding, like the Greyhound subsidies and the courtesy patrol. I like the courtesy patrol, but we could use that $5 million for roads instead. I mean, things like that. The House passed some of those things. Either they died in the Senate or the governor vetoed them. So we're going to have to continue fighting for appropriate cuts so we don't take the big hit here in Montague County. Because I think they see the success up here, for sure. And I'm very proud to have passed a lot of bills to help deal with the drug epidemic. I was the lead sponsor of the bill to create a substance abuse office in the DHHR to help deal with this, to help work on education in the schools against drugs, to increase the inpatient beds for treatment, and many other things and to account for the overdoses to help us receive funding, federal grants. We enhance penalties to drug traffickers, to people trafficking drugs with children in the vehicles, trafficking fentanyl, meth, and to go after the kingpins. So we really dealt with the treatment, education, and the enhanced penalties for the traffickers to try to keep it out of here. And I think that you'll see that our law enforcement is doing a good job to help clean up Montague County, because there's a serious problem here. I did vote for the road bond. I know that's a big issue here. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Bridge.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Williams. I represent the 51st District. Like Delegate Fritch and Fleshire, that's essentially all of Montague County. I serve on the House's Committee on Government Organization, Roads and Transportation, and I am the Minority Vice Chair on Political Subdivisions. If you followed my campaign at all, then you'll know that I put a huge premium on helping to fix the roads in our area. And I'm very happy with a lot of the bills that came out the road bond, which I hope you all will vote for in a matter of 2 months so that we can get all the monies that we possibly could to help our horribly dilapidated infrastructure in our area and in the state. The other issue that I found myself working on for seemingly the entirety of the session was curbing the cuts that were offered for higher ed. One of the statistics that I used in a floor speech when I discussed the matter was that for every state dollar that is attributed to WVU generates 10 more. Now, I don't think we all need to take a break and call our financial advisors to know that that's a pretty good investment. That's an investment that you should not reduce. It's one that you should double down on. If we're bringing in money for you, really unleash what I believe to be an economic beast, the economic beast of the whole state in Montague County. See what we can do in terms of funding at the state level, in terms of revenue that we can create. I was unhappy with the cuts that were created. Unfortunately, with the scenario in which we left the budget, we're going to be in the same crisis that we were last time. And I don't want to see WVU and higher ed as a whole always be the whipping boy to balance the budget. So I'm going to continue, I'm going to go back to session and continue to fight those cuts. And hopefully one day, if we find ourselves in the black in the state, hopefully that'll happen someday. If we find ourselves in the black, we'll see a restoration of funds to higher education, WVU specifically, to what they previously enjoyed. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all. If you don't get to ask a question of me or any of these legislators, you may do so afterward. I'm sure they won't mind, and I certainly won't.
2 minutes.
Thank you.
Perfect timing. Maybe 2 minutes was a little conservative, but we do want to make sure we have enough time. And again, please give our legislators a round of applause. They spend so much time fighting. Demonstrated by this past session, it's not just those 60 days, right? It's special sessions, it's interims, it's all year round. They're watching out for us. So thank you again for all that you do. We want to start with audience questions, but just to kind of get your creative juices flowing on things you might ask about. These are the topics that we suggested to our legislators might come up today. One, you've heard a couple of times mentioned the road bond, which is going to be voted on here in a couple of months. The other issue is another road issue. It's the local bill, which passed last year, and what the update is on that. And our Eldon, our fearless leader, who's joined us in the back, might be able to facilitate that conversation a little bit. We also want to hear anything else about the budget that you think is important. I know you all touched on that a good bit. And then another initiative that the Government Affairs Committee is exploring is I'm not going to say metro government because that's a dirty word, but government consolidation and government efficiencies. So we can facilitate that conversation too. But first we wanted to open it up to you and see if any of you have questions that you'd like to ask any of these legislators. Yes.
Yeah, Mike Callan, thank you for coming here and spending time. I know you are busy like all of us. Like all people, working people, I'm a taxpayer, and like all taxpayers, I don't like taxes. And frankly, I'm glad to see there is real emphasis in Charleston as a group. There's a group down there, maybe they pushed the envelope a little far, that they're trying to hold the line on taxes, even cut taxes. All that said, our state needs money. And our roads are in particularly bad shape. Now, I'd like to know what the possibility is of increasing, frankly, significantly the gas tax. If you adjust for inflation, we're paying a whole lot less per gallon now than we were back in the 70s when I was in college, a lot less. I talked to one of our legislators during the session, and I said, hey, why don't you bump it 10 cents minimum? I'd like to see it go up maybe, I mean, I don't want to see taxes go up, but the gas tax really is as close as you get to a user fee. You drive an extra mile, you pay for that mile. Our roads are in horrible shape. Now, I know that the gas tax, you raise it up, and that's really, people see that, so I know there's kind of some hesitant there. You can't hide that tax like some of these taxes. But considering the condition of our road, I mean, is there any, and I know, and I'm glad to see there is a strong emphasis in Charleston, try to limit government and control taxes, but is there any real possibility that there could be a significant increase in what to me is really a user fee so we can get these roads paved?
I'll address something. The gas tax was raised this year. You may be aware, 3.5 cents. Other fees were raised as well to raise money, the DMV fees. They're talking about all of the tolls on roads being raised. Coming from Taylor County, the problem my constituents there have is they all drive outside of county to work because it's more of a bedroom community with very few jobs. So they're hitting 119 every day, 30 miles up, 30 miles back. And my community doesn't make very much money. So maybe here it might be a little easier for people to pay the extra, but that money that's coming out of their paycheck for that gas tax is money then that they don't have for the medicine and food, the basics, because they're not getting the extra things in life that they could cut. So my district did not want any of those tax increases that you were talking about. They were very strong against it. But I certainly encourage the voting of the road bond because it's another way to fund the roads that the voters can decide, not 135 of us. And that puts it out to the people, and if they feel as strongly about the roads as most of us do, that they are that bad, then I think they'll be willing to support that road bond. So it puts it back to the people for them to make the decision.
Maybe it's just a follow-up to that. So my understanding is you just addressed all the fees or the taxes that were assessed. 3.5 cents on the gas tax, the DMV fees, the tolls. Those are going to be there regardless, right? So
Yes, that passed.
as we look at, whether to support this bond or not to support this bond, the question is as simple as, do you want that money to go to roads or do you not, right? So, I mean, there's really, as we look at, and everybody talked about it, and the need for it is very apparent in this community. I mean, I don't want to call it a no-brainer, but you're going to pay the fees anyway. Why not have it go to roads, right? I mean, could somebody maybe clarify that that's how that works?
Yeah, let me address this. Mike, you really touched on a good point. You're right down my alley. I agree with what Delegate Summers said as far as rural people, and I have a lot of rural people. But let me give you an example. This is true numbers from my household. Last year, I drove roughly 20,000 miles on 2 vehicles. So if I got 20 miles per gallon, which I did better than that, I bought how much gas? You know,
Need a calculator.
I bought roughly 1,000 gallons of gas. And I paid the tax on it. And when I divided out, I paid $1.93 a day to use all of the highways in the United States. All of them, for $1.93 a day. At the same time, I paid $4.02 for the insurance to drive on those highways. And that just tells you sometimes you got the cart before the horse. Now, remember, highway money cannot be spent for anything else. And I'll make this comment now. Governor Justice had thrown out, I say thrown out something to see how many dogs are going to bark, about taking putting a 5% fee on contractors to get these road jobs. Well, to me, this is just a backdoor attempt to take highway money and put it into the general fund. And I've already told people, I'm going to fight that tooth and nail. They'll have to drag me out of the Senate on that one, because I'm not going to see that happen no matter what we try to do. That money needs to stay into the road fund. Now, if the road bond passes, what that basically means is that we can have the money now instead of getting it a little bit every year for 20 or 30 years. And we can get these major projects done. The second thing is that that's going to free up some of the money that's in the current money, not in what we just passed that's going to pay off the road bonds. But some of the money in the current budget can now be used to fix secondary roads and fix the other roads that are not included in this road bond. But I agree with Mike. We really have a bargain for what we're paying in highway taxes, and it's good to know that that money stays in the highway fund. It's not going for anything else.
Chad, I think you narrowed it down to a really succinct point for the motors, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. And I just want to explain. And Charlie's right too. What our Constitution says is anything road related has to go into the road fund. But it also says that when you borrow money, I mean, basically we have a prohibition against borrowing money unless the people approve it. When you do that, when you have a road bond, you have to have a specific amount of money that is dedicated to that bond. So the increases that we passed will be dedicated to the bond. We couldn't have done the bond without passing those increases. So, you know, you have to be for both if you really want to improve the roads. And you know, I'm pretty unhappy with Governor Justice for changing parties, but I do appreciate that he that he really pushed the road bond, because I think that if we're going to move forward, that is the only way. We can't have, you know, third world roads if we want to go into the 21st and the 22nd century.
Mike, going back to your original word, Mike, going back to your original question, whether the legislature had the stomach to add 10 cents, the answer is no. Quite honestly, I mean, we can have these conversations in the hallways in our offices, but John Q. Public would not accept a 10-cent increase, just plain simple. We understand that it's actually the cheapest way to go. It is a user fee, as you mentioned. But yeah, John Q. Public, it becomes a huge education issue to have these folks understand that this is actually cheaper than, you know, additional taxes over here, or dealing with bad roads and what it does to your car. So yeah, I think what the governor's proposed with the road bond and the fact that I think we all voted for it, as far as I know, and the 3.5% increase on taxes, the DMV fees, I think we have something going for us. We just have to get out there and push this bond issue in October.
I think we have a follow-up question out there.
What about just taxing diesel so that it's it's the heavy trucks and the industries that are bearing the brunt of the gas tax as opposed to the general public who generally just.
You know, and quite honestly, we have had those discussions. Those kind of fizzled out, and we just dealt with what we had on the table before us. I believe the 3.5% increase we are dealing with now was originally 5 or 7% increase. So there was obviously some moving around there to get us to where we are today. But I think the diesel conversation just kind of fizzled out and never went anywhere.
Although we do tax by weight.
Yes.
So trucks and heavy vehicles pay more.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that during the regular session, we passed 3 of the governor's bills to deal with the roads. We passed the road bond. Extended the amount of Garvey bonds that we could float, because when Governor Tomlin left office, he used up a lot of our bonding authority with Garvey bonds for that Southern West Virginia project. And we passed a design build bill. But then during the special session, of course, we raised the floor on the gas tax. We passed a tolling bill, and they passed a bill to increase DMV fees, which will continually increase over time without any vote of the legislature. And for the past several years, the administration has been asking the legislature to take money out of the road fund in order to help balance the budget. And we tried to consistently resist that. And another problem is that the Division of Transportation, the Division of Highways, has not even been expending all of their maintenance money. So there's that breeds suspicion with legislators that the money's not even being used appropriately for maintenance. And people want to see maintenance, I believe, probably even more than they want to see new roads. I mean, if you live around Quarter H, you want Quarter H, but most people are really worried about the roads they have to travel every day, and what a terrible mess they're in. It's terrible. And another important thing, as I said, the governors, Tomlin and Justice, were trying to take money out of the state road fund to help balance the budget. And the budget is totally different. Balancing a budget is totally different than the state road fund. And why we got into the mess of having to cut higher ed in the end, as little as less than had been previously proposed. When you don't pass legislation during a regular session in order to cut funding, much of the spending in the budget is codified. It has to happen because of laws. If you don't pass those bills in order to cut those things that you may not need, may be wasteful, may not be as important as higher education, then you're stuck with really 2 places to cut to make significant cuts to balance the budget. And when you're in trouble, and we're in trouble with the warrant call, you can cut higher ed and you can cut Medicaid. And Medicaid comes with a 3-to-1 match. So that's not very appealing either. So if you can't pass legislation and get it signed by a governor to make cuts, you're going to end up being able to go where the money is, where you can take it without passing legislation. And that's the mess we keep seeing. So hopefully in the future we can work better together in the House and the Senate, with the governor, to cut wasteful spending instead of cutting WVU and Medicaid.
Thank you, Delegate Fritsch, for highlighting some of the intricacies that go into the budget process. And Tom, I want to get to your question, but just to kind of back up a little bit, I know you all supported the road bond. Educate us on what it is that's going to happen in October. There's going to be a special election. What are we voting on, and why should we vote any way you think we should vote?
Well, unless it's come out in recent days or even hours, what many of us up here are waiting on is the call. What's on the call and what roads are to be on this budget or on this vote in October. So that's the first step for us. And then we would like to get out there and start promoting it. I think many of us already are in our circles where we're out socializing, whatever. But yeah, it's definitely a need to know what's going on out there, because folks, speaking with Delegate Pepper here earlier before we started, there's already a pushback from our public out in the rural areas that there's nothing in it for me. Well, there is, because we're all sharing this. I mean, whatever's good for Morgantown, whatever's good for Mon County, whatever's good for Marion and Fairmont benefits all of us. It's a trickle-down effect. So, there's an old saying about all politics are local, but all roads are local also. And I think we need to be pushing this thing as much as we can. And I know we have a local initiative here that we're working on, the Chamber's been working on, and we can talk about that in a little more detail. But we really need to get out and push this bond issue, because it really will change the state of West Virginia.
Is that regardless of what's in the call, you think, that we need to support?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Because there's going to be projects across the state. You've seen the billboards that the governor's had out there, the white poster boards. And there's something in every community for everyone. Now, folks are looking at the maintenance. And again, it goes back to all roads are local. maintenance will be taken care of once this bond proposal is passed, because it frees up money over here in the Department of Highways that we're trying to do everything with. So this will allow us to get into those maintenance issues of mowing and patching and paving in those rural areas. And folks just need to realize that. We have this bond over here, we take care of our roads, then we free up the money that's already existing in the Department of Highways.
Okay, Doug,
I would just like to add something that Delegate Fritsch mentioned on the money that's in the Department of Transportation, and that is what has been a big issue for a lot of us, because they left $158 million on the table last year, and I know we talked about this before, and maybe some money's tied up. I didn't read that in the audit. But we just want to make sure before we ask our people for more money, that they're spending the money they have efficiently, and, you know, we're talking about maintenance. They're not getting to maintenance. They're not digging ditches. They're not doing things. So I met with Tom Smith, who's the new Cabinet Secretary for Department of Transportation. And like you said, you know, rural communities, they'll look at the list of the road projects that are put forward, and there's nothing on there for Taylor County. And so how do those people vote for that, like you said, because it's for the good of the whole state? They just want, other than Route 119 and Route 250, something done to another road. I mean, just dig my ditches or pave my secondary road that hasn't been paved in 10 years. So they need, part of the message needs to be about the maintenance, that we're increasing what we're doing. They're saying there was horrible project management at the state level on getting things done. And we need that. And I'm confident we have a new secretary. I'm giving him a chance to put things in place that can happen. But we just want, the rural communities just want our maintenance done.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd say the road bond is in big trouble. And I think, let me pass this back right to you all. Unless there is support, it's not going to pass. We do not have a strong history of passing bonds. And, you know, people are suspicious. And I think what you said, Chad, is a really winning argument. These taxes are, it is not an increase in taxes because they passed before. But, you know, with the governor's party switch, that's made it a little bit more complicated. Some Democrats are not going to be as enthusiastic. I mean, it passed because of Democrats. There was a lot of Republican resistance to the underlying taxes. It's hard to vote for taxes, you know? And so if you all want that increased money, or if anyone in our county, in our community, in our larger community wants to see either maintenance or roads improvements, that bond has to pass, or otherwise we are going to just continue in our downward direction. So we need your help.
Can I go back to this real quick? One of the problems we have with maintenance in the state of West Virginia is that we're over 800 people short in the Department of Highways. That impacts the state a great deal. And I think here locally, I want to say it's like 27 people here on the campus.
But I want to go back to
Huge
the
number.
efficiencies issue. I mean, I drive up and down that interstate once or twice a week to Charleston from Bridgeport or Morgantown. And it is, and I get it. I'm going to support it because I understand the economic impact. All of us do. I mean, it's an issue that we spent the morning talking about it. So I'm going to support it. My family's going to support it. We get it. But for, you know, the average Joe driving up and down that, and we say we're 800 people short, I get frustrated when I'm stuck in traffic and they're working on a road for lane closing, and there's 2 people working, and there's 6 people standing around a truck. That's very frustrating to me. And if I'm an average Joe driving up and down the interstate, and I see that, and I'm asked to vote yes or no on whether I should send more money to these projects coming out of my household budget, I'm going to question the viability of that vote. I mean, those are the issues people are facing.
I asked the new secretary about that, and the fact that people in my district contact me, telling me that they see workers sitting in their truck looking like they're reading or eating lunch. And he told me, he justified it, said they're working on something on the computer, and I said, well, I'm going to just stop by, knock on their window, and ask them what they're doing, and I would recommend my constituents to do that if you see it, knock on the window.
I mean, I'm not going to do that, but, I mean, I'm technically driving, but, I mean, I'm just, that can be very frustrating for people. So when we talk about efficiencies and things like that, that's what people are seeing.
Actually, if Most of our road construction is contracted out.
And I know
To
that. I
private, that's
absolutely am
private
aware of that.
employees. So if
I
you
know
saw
that.
somebody on the interstate, and the only way the interstate is taking, I mean, that's the road that's most taken care of, and also 119, because they're
That
federal
road is
roads.
crazy.
Well,
I mean, I've watched that for 2 years, that where it caved in there, they fixed that 3 times at least. Who's in charge of that? Who's overseeing the
The
efficiency and
Department of
quality of work?
Transportation.
The administration.
Well,
Tom, did you, I want to get back to your question, because
I was gonna have a totally different question.
It's probably time to move on. Yeah, we're getting restless in here on the roads.
And I think we all realize that the role of government, whether it's at state or local, is to provide services, and in conjunction with the provision of those services, we pay fees. That we see at the state level that there's continued cutbacks in the types of services and fees. We have, at the other hand, we have a number of municipalities, I think it's greater than 30, that have gone after home rule. It seems to me the major tax reform issue should be devolving more responsibilities and capabilities down to municipalities who have county commissions and city councils that are much more attuned to the needs of their citizens. So I'd like to know what you will do in terms of devolving more responsibilities and authority to localities so that they can better attune the delivery of their services to their citizens. Because after all, this top-down federal, state government overreach of local governments is one of the reasons why we're having problems in Montague County, but we're having different economies across the state that are continuing to wrestle with these issues, and the legislature has to take the lead, in my way of thinking, of giving more responsibility and authority to local governments, and I'd like to know your opinions about that.
Well, I'll be honest with you, 17 years ago, if you come to me and ask me about metro government or urban government, I'd say, not ready for it. But I think West Virginia's ready for it now, 17 years later, I think we really are. I'm in and out of Lexington, Kentucky all the time. That's urban government right there. It's a shining piece of example of how urban government works. And in the last 10 years, my brother-in-law, who now works for the city of Lexington, has really opened me up to the benefits of an urban government. And I think that's something that the legislature should truly take a serious look at. And you know, we are kind of skittish group of people anyways, and it may go into a study, but I think time is now to talk about it and take it up and work on a piece of legislation that, again, just like we did with home rule, let's get a few experimental cities out there and test the waters and see how it works for us.
We did have a bill that passed home rule for all, to allow home rule for every county or every.
But those counties have to go to the state to get approval of
Right.
home rule.
Right, right.
That's not the way it works in other states.
Yeah,
Did
true.
you have a comment?
I just wanted to say that this year we did pass a bill, another bill with home rule. Governor Justice ended up vetoing it. I know city of New Martinsville, which is in the 5th district, I know they wanted that bill really bad, and you know, I've promised them that I'll work with the municipal league next year to try to refine that bill and address the objections the governor had and work on that again.
But I see what you're saying. We shouldn't have any say at all. You should be able to do what you want to do is your point, correct?
Yeah. And then the city councils and the county commissions are there day in, day out, responding to their constituencies and the delivery in a cost-effective fashion, those services, whereas the legislature is only down there 60 days.
120.
Is there a question in the background, sir?
Yeah, just to kind of get back to the revenue side a little bit. One of the more divisive things that I kind of heard this last year was the desire to cut personal income taxes. There seemed to be a big push to do that constantly. And the state chamber, I think, did not support that. They were more into the revenue. They also supported a 1 or 2% sales tax increase, whether it's on food or just general sales tax. I think it well went 1 or 2%. And that would have basically fixed the shortfall and not have us once again raise the rainy day fund, which if we continue to do that will affect our ability to borrow and our costs of borrowing and everything else, which becomes a total spiraling thing. So my question kind of is, I get the sales tax, why people are pushing back, I mean, especially around the contiguous states, but the income tax issue about wanting to cut that, and I'm a CPA, so I don't do taxes, so I'm not one of those guys, but my question is, why was there a big push for people to want to cut the personal income tax? And why was that such a, because it seemed to be a roadblock in both the House and the Senate within finance to get anything done. So that was my question. Is there really a push from the constituencies that you're hearing to cut personal income tax?
I think that basically the way I saw this issue was that the House Democrats and the House Republicans did not want to cut the personal income tax. And also, I believe that the Senate Democrats didn't want that. At least it seemed to me that at least some of the Senate Republicans and Governor Justice was the ones that were really pushing that. I think, last year during interims there was a tax reform study group, but I think the reason that we were so hesitant about doing anything with personal income tax because there's not enough known out there to know what the ramifications are going to be. If you looked what happened like in the state of Kansas, they had major problems there. I know that tax reform committee is going to be meeting again during interims between now and January of 2018, and I'm sure that issue will be studied more.
And I
Clear,
think
I'm
that-
against cutting them because of the situation we're in as a state.
Right,
You
I
keep
understand
cutting
that.
revenue.
Delegate Williams, did you have a comment?
Yeah, Davey covered a lot of it, but you can't raise sales tax on percentage points. That's a regressive tax. That's going to hurt poor people, middle class people, and then make up for that then by cutting taxes on some of the wealthiest of West Virginians. And that's, and that's largely what we saw with these income tax plans was a decrease for the richest of West Virginians, and then by and large an increase for middle class folks and low class folks. I don't get the logic. It's kind of like Charlie Brown with the football. It's kind of one of those issues that a lot of legislative groups have just pushed for years and years and years. And I don't like to pay taxes either. Like Mike said, I don't like to pay taxes, but if I can help contribute to society and invest in society, then that's what I'm going to have to do. And right now, I don't think we are in a position to cut. If we ever do come to a position where we can cut personal income taxes, let's do it. But right now, we're just not there. And I agree with you. I never really understood, the supposition behind it, why they were really chasing that.
I don't really know of groups that have supported this in the past, or even the Republican platform or anything like that, although we're not for, we're for a low tax burden. But in economic theory, the income tax is a disincentive to work. So I guess in theory, cutting the income tax would spur economic growth, and maybe people were thinking wealthy people would come to West Virginia. So if you believe that that's going to work in West Virginia and wealthy people are going to come here and it's going to spur economic growth, then I guess you'd support it. But I believe we have so many other problems that are a disincentive to work in West Virginia. I want to work on this problem, so I never did really buy into what was going on. And as far as really groups pushing it, I'm really not aware that there were a lot of constituency groups pushing for this. But in economic theory, it would work, but I don't believe it will work here. And I was really fearful of the huge hole it could blow in the budget in future years. And it's not really fair. We have so many people just hanging on in West Virginia, and it's unfair to shift the burden that way.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That was really what we were fighting about all of June. And basically, House Republicans and Senate Democrats were pretty much and probably some Senate Republicans too, were pretty much in agreement. The income tax, and nobody likes to pay taxes, but if you want roads and if you want schools, that's how we do it together. It's 46% of our budget, and we had a $500 million deficit. When you're in a hole, you don't dig it deeper, and that wasn't the only, there were several different income taxes being talked about. So you know, there might be some adjustment of income tax and sales tax that some of us could agree on, but that's what we were fighting about, and that's, you know, that's what we'll be fighting about again next year probably. And it's unfortunate because we do need more revenue, but that wasn't a way to get it. And Kansas was very much looming.
I'd just like to add, I don't think we fight about it. We're debating about it. But I do, that is the beauty of the government system in the fact that we didn't do it, right? One group out of several had that idea and brought it forward and tried to sell it, and we didn't buy it. So, you know, it did work out, I think, the way that the majority of us wanted. And we did not get that. So.
Mike, you got time for one quick question, and then
Okay,
we're
quick
gonna-
question. Food tax, a rather prominent member of the legislature told me this past year he could balance the budget very easily and list 2 or 3 things. And one of them was, I was shocked how much this food tax generated. And he said, you know, the prior governor got a lot of credit when things were good, phasing out the tax, that was all good, but things aren't so good now. And he said, I don't know if he proposed it down there, but he said, we could put it back on and then set up the trigger to take it off automatically. And it was like hundreds of millions of dollars. Is there any stomach to do that? I know the downside, but what about that?
Well, I wouldn't have a problem with doing that, and I know that very prominent legislator you're speaking of. And, yeah, he's correct. We could have fixed it, been in and out of there in no time at all. You know, the sales tax, as all of you know, has been in place, been taken away, been in place. And there's nothing to say that we couldn't have set a trigger in there that 4 years out that it comes off again. So, yeah, he's correct, absolutely.
Delegate Fritsch made a comment in her opening statement about the cuts being disproportionate to this part of the state. And I want to shift back to the budget a little bit and ask, I know you all advocate and champion this part of our state very hard in Charleston, and I certainly don't want to spark any geopolitical warfare here like Westeros or something, but I would like each of you to take a moment and comment on your efforts to protect what we have up here with the university and other initiatives that are funded through the state and the cuts that were proposed this year. And Delegate Williams, would you mind starting?
Sure. Throughout the whole legislative session, I was in touch with all of WVU's people, meeting with them down there. Sometimes I have the pleasure to talk with Dr. Gee to keep him abreast of my efforts and also have them share with me some of the things they were hearing from the Senate, some of the attitudes they were hearing from my fellow delegates. The initial cut that came out of the Senate, I believe, was 16%. Is that right, Travis, you think? 16% we're talking about that they were advocating for. The governor stayed constant at about 4.5%, and we saw every percentage between 16 and 4.5% throughout the legislative session. I'm unhappy with the cuts that we did get hit with. As I said earlier, I don't want to see any cuts to higher ed, particularly WVU, but it's way better than what could have been had the Senate had their way, and we have a real fight, and so it's going to take keeping in touch with WVU's folks, and also I think all the legislators you see up here to my left, we need to work together to make sure that we protect our wonderful gem that is WVU to ensure that it continues to be the firing source for this economic engine up here.
We're going in order. Well, 16%, the Senate wanted to cut it by 25%, so believe me, behind the scenes I was fighting with, I was having a lot of discussions with a lot of people. So we are in a much better situation than what it could have been. But when money's so tight, you're going to find we have a constitutional duty to balance the budget. We have to find money somewhere. So we need to pass legislation so that we can cut money that's codified, so we can get rid of wasteful programs and wasteful spendings. So legislators aren't going to the well of Medicaid and higher ed. And again, when money is so tight and so many people in our state are hurting, they see us up here of how successful we are, and then instead of perhaps wanting to reward success, that's where you want to get your funding, and that's what's going on right now. This is something, it's always been a problem in Charleston, but I've never seen it like this because things have been so challenging with the budget. So we do need to work together. We need to pass legislation to be able to get at other monies so that there is money available to fund higher education. And I'm going to continue to work towards that end and continue to fight for WVU and Montague County. And I had to continue to communicate with the majority, the Senate majority, because there is no majority member in the Senate representing Montague County or Morgantown or Huntington. So that's another root of the problem. I hate to have to say that, but there's no Republican senators from Morgantown or Huntington, so they need constant education. Because it's not a geopolitical thing they need to protect.
Right.
So I need to constantly get on the Senate about funding WVU and higher education. I'll continue to do that.
Senator Clements.
Well, we in the Senate are taking a beating here, aren't we? I'm a firm believer that if we don't have education, we've got nothing. It's unfortunate when we look at our budget, though, we're tied down so much by Medicaid. Look what that takes out of our budget every time. And when you get right down to it, there's very few options, and unfortunately, it came down to either public education or higher education, and it seemed like, in that case, public education won. I would have no problem at all in going back with the food tax. I think that that would stop us from having to fight that battle. And living in a border county, you hear all the time, oh, you don't want to put the food tax back because everybody's going to cross the river to do what they're going to do their shopping. And I don't think in my own life I've ever wondered whether I'm going to pay sales tax or not, whether I'm going to buy my groceries. So I don't want to see any cuts. In particular, like I said, WVU and this area over here is a star, it's shining bright in the state of West Virginia. And, you know, yes, I had to support the budget because we had to, and the Constitution said this is all we've got, this is all the income we've got. So we have to balance that budget, and I hated to see that, but it's just one thing, but I think we'll see some changes coming up this year.
I'll just say that I did not support the budget. I represent 3 institutions within my district, WVU, Fairmont State, and Pierpont Community College. So education is very high on my list of priorities. It will impact the state of West Virginia as we move forward. Higher education as a whole, we've already seen it here in Morgantown, a small impact on our community in regards to the technology summit that was supposed to occur here in late August. Well, that was canceled, and it was at the waterfront. So that's a pretty big event. It's one of those events that fills up both parking garages. So right there you have individuals not coming to our community to take advantage of a hotel stay, our restaurants, and other things here in the community. So we've already had an impact there in regards to that, and I think we're going to feel a little bit more pain before it's over. I too would share Senator Clements' thoughts that a sales tax on food would be easy to implement again, and then again create that trigger in that mechanism to do away with it. But education is important to me, and I spoke on the floor in great depth as to why we should not do it, because I cut to WVU, and I thank Travis back here for the information he provided me, has a very strong network. WVU has a very strong network across the state of West Virginia as far as the programs it offers. So it impacts every community. It's just not Montague County, but every county across the state, because we're talking about 4-H and other programs like that that are impacted by budget cuts. When you start, you know, WVU's got to take a black marker someplace. So, you know, those little programs in outlying areas you know, are going to be hit. So no, education is very high on my list, and it will always be high on my list.
Let me say that I certainly did not want to see cuts, especially to higher education. I'm a retired public educator for 40 years, so I know how important that education is. And as I said, every opportunity that I had to support new revenue in order that we would not have to have those cuts, you know, I supported it. I certainly believe that, you know, we shouldn't be balancing the budget on one-time money. This next fiscal year, the budget's going to be, you know, very difficult again. And I also worked with Travis. He always, you know, kept us informed as to what, you know, WVU could support, what they couldn't support. But I always tell my constituents this, remember, that we have to have a balanced general revenue budget. I tell them, this is not Washington DC where you just can continue to add to that. And when you have public education, higher education, DHHR, that's the main components of the general revenue budget, then it's difficult when you have to make cuts.
I think, just first let me say about Medicaid. The largest portion of spending for Medicaid is for the elderly. That's your grandma, that's your grandpa, and we are not going to kick them out of nursing homes. That's where the cost is. And we have to remember that. That is the big portion of the cost. But that being said, I did propose an amendment to add money back in for WVU, and I had a revenue source for that money, which was largely from the Higher Education Policy Commission, which was an attempt to sort of streamline our higher education, which in the end, I think they became another kind of bloated bureaucracy. I made that amendment, it failed. I'm sad about that, but that's what we have to do is move on. And I think it's really important how much in every place where we work, in the Finance Committee and on the floor of the Senate and on the floor of the House, that we talk about higher education, because so that we explain how important it is to our state for moving forward. It may not be as obvious. It's obvious in this town, but it may not be obvious everywhere else, and we need to talk about it. That's part of, even though the amendment failed, we made sure people realized, and it was both Marshall and WVU.
My dad graduated WVU, my husband and I graduated there, all three of my kids graduated from there. Well, I have one more, he's a senior. I moved him down here yesterday. I work for WVU Hospital. So I strongly support them. When it came to the budget though, I'm not gonna shut down the government because we don't have a budget, and I'm gonna support what ends up happening. That was going to be too detrimental, and you could see people flirting with that, right? Because we don't want this to happen to our colleges, and I'm not going to support it. But I have too many state workers and too many people that depend on state agencies in my area that would have really hurt them. I think what this does when we make these cuts that we don't like is it's going to push us, and that's why we're there, right? To make these hard decisions, that we have to get rid of some of these things, like Cindy mentioned the Greyhound racing that we gave $15 million to, and then we fight over, is it a subsidy or is it or isn't it? If we could have given, that money could be for WVU, $15 million, and it wouldn't go to dog racing. There's choices that have to be made, and people have to make the tough choices. So that didn't pass. We tried other type of ways, didn't pass, and this is what happened. So that's the result.
Thank you. I think Chad had.
Yeah, just to follow up on the budget, I know that all of you are, kind of part-time legislators in 60 days, and I put that in quotations because I know it's really a full-time job, and again, we appreciate all you do. With that in mind, it feels like the last at least 3 years, and probably going back more than that, a lot of time is spent talking about the budget, and we're not spending enough time, in my view anyway, talking about issues that can change the trajectory of our state. Is there any consideration of maybe having multi-year budgets? So instead of going in every single year and we talk about the budget and the budget and the budget, we have a 2 or 3 year budget because we've got revenue forecasts, so we've got all these things, and then maybe make minor tweaks along the way so that every single legislative session isn't always 95% occupied with the budget discussion.
I'll disagree in that nothing else. I
didn't mean nothing
else.
else.
Everything we talked about, but we did pass 261 other bills. Usually we average about 233. So there was a lot of work going on, but I think the media is what covered that. Because every single year, that's the whole discussion's about the budget. Every year it's going to be.
I guess if I'm looking at it, multi-year versus a single year, give up the opportunity of responding more quickly. If you're working on a 3-year budget, problems arise, you're 3 years out. Not to mention our forecasts have been way off the mark in the last few years, so we're always going back and moving things around. Personally, I would think that moving away from that 1 year cycle would be just a little disadvantaged. Just
Maybe let me ask it a different way then. What would you do to change the idea that we're spending so much time talking about the budget, and maybe it's just perception, but the perception is there's less time spent talking about other issues?
What you change? Well, let me go back to this past session and do away with what else has happened in the past. Bottom line is no means no. And they kept coming back to us with this crazy proposal with income tax. And that was the holdup. And Barbara mentioned it. We could have been out there 3 days after session ended had we not been dealing with that. And they kept bringing it back, And I think it was a total of 5 versions of that particular piece of legislation that kept coming back to us. So again, no means no. And we were very clear the first time around. The House was very clear that they weren't going to have anything to do with that piece of legislation. So again, I think a lot of that could have been alleviated had they just, with the governor's office and a few key people in the Senate, just realized, okay, this is not going to work. So
I don't think we would have even gotten into this personal income tax debate had there not been vetoes of the budget. There was a dramatic, with Governor Tomlin's final year, there was a dramatic change in revenue forecasts after the House and Senate each passed their own budget, and it was time to go into the conference committee. There was a dramatic change in revenues where there would have been no way to pass a budget. Throwing it into special session where the legislature, Republican, House and Senate, lose control over the budget. It put it more in an equal playing field with all members of the legislature and with the governor in charge because he controls the call and what goes on the call. And then this year, if we would have passed legislation, if they would have been successful to make these cuts and increase revenues, the beer tax. I didn't want to vote for taxes. I voted to raise the beer tax. It failed on the House floor. If we would have had all that in better order this year, there would have been no legitimate reason for a governor to veto a budget, and we would have been in special session where it's controlled by the governor. The governor took up with this Senate idea on the personal income tax, and that's when that started becoming an issue. And then there's nothing else for the press to cover, because all we're doing is what's on the governor's call, and that's the budget. And quite frankly, it took him weeks to put the budget on the call. He only had his proposed revenue measures on the governor's call. We couldn't even pass a budget. We couldn't do what we needed to do to pass a budget. He wanted us to pass these tax increases, the tax increases he proposed, and then he'd give us the budget. And that's how the timing worked on this. So that's why there's so much coverage of the budget, and why it seems like that's all we're really doing is the budget.
And I obviously recognize that's not the case, but it is a predominant part of what happens year in and year out. It just seems to dominate the session.
And we can't pass a budget till after the session because you're passing legislation during a short period of time, and we don't know till the end what bills are going to pass and what maybe it'll cost more money because there's new programs, or there'll be less programs so we have more money available, or there'll be tax increases so there'll be more money.
Right.
So you can't really cobble together your budget to put before the legislature, and then you have the House and the Senate.
I know there were some hands up here, there was a question here, and Susan's got a question. You all want to finish the conversation. Was your question about the budget? Do you have a question about the budget?
My question is, in all the different ways that Chad put it, bottom line is, what can, in each of your opinions, what can we do to avoid the situation with the budget that seems to be a year in, year out thing, as well as what would each one of you recommend is done to avoid us getting to this point again that wastes all this time and money in special sessions and, poor media covering the wrong things and so on and so forth. What can be done now to set us up for success in the future?
Well, we passed a budget on day 57 this year, and then it was vetoed, so it got out of our control. So I don't know how we can effectively make a change there when that control was removed from us.
Okay, let me, Hope, Delegate Fleischauer, and then I'm going to go to Delegate Williams.
Okay, one of the things that I wanted to do was respond to Chad is I think a lot of what we're talking about is in our Constitution. And to do that multi-year budget, and it's not something that I know has been raised before, I think would require a constitutional amendment. But it's not true that we have had these crises for every year in the past. We've had them in the past 3 years. And prior to that, for 83 years, we passed the budget on time. And,
Well, in fairness, we had the benefit of significant coal severance during those periods of time. These last 3 years have obviously dwindled down significantly, so there's been tougher decisions that have to be made. So now is the time to potentially look at changing
The
how
way
we
we're doing
react.
things.
Yeah.
Every year since I've been there, the finance chair said this is gonna be a really rough budget. Every year.
Understood.
Delegate Williams, did you have a comment?
So you're asking about how we might possibly remedy the situation so we won't run into it in the future. One issue, or one idea rather, that's been floated comes from Mick Bates. He's a colleague of ours from Raleigh who sits on the Finance Committee. He's floated the idea of, instead of taking care of the budget on the back end of the legislative session, take care of it on the front end. And so then the impetus would be on all 134 members of the legislature to hurry up and get the budget passed. Otherwise, your bills that you're working on yourself, they're not going to have a chance of going anywhere. So I think that's an idea that's worth investigating so that we can avoid these quagmires that we found ourselves in recent years.
Good idea.
Well, as Amy tried to point out, the budget this year was passed earlier than ever. And the governor vetoed it. He told us all year long he was going to veto it. So I don't know if it mattered if it would have been a perfect budget, if he would have vetoed it or not. Maybe now that he switched parties, maybe he won't veto a Republican budget. I don't know. That's the one silver lining that I see in his party. Hopefully it won't happen. But we do need to have a good budget, and that would take passing legislation before the end of the session that gets rid of wasteful spending so we have money so we can pass a good budget. And I don't know. If you passed a budget early in the year, I guess that would sure mean you couldn't create any new programs. So they wouldn't be able to do much in legislation, so
Let me
you have to
ask
think
if
about that.
there are any other questions from the audience. Mark, did you have
Yeah, I
something?
have a question. I'm Mark Sestari from Southern Airways. We're the airline that flies here in Morgantown. Our company's grown in the past 18 months from 8 million to 30 million. We started with 60 employees. We have 300 now. We've just added a second maintenance base. We did look at Morgantown, and we put the second maintenance base in Pennsylvania. You guys have all acknowledged their infrastructure and workforce issues here. I am involved in government affairs and community relations in all 22 of our markets. We love Morgantown. It's one of our best performing markets. But in terms of growth, we look at infrastructure, we look at workforce, and we look at quality of life. If we're going to grow in a place, we want to be in a place that people want to move to, that they feel has a future. It sounds like a deferred investment of, you guys were hit very hard by the downturn. You're slower coming out of it than a lot of other places, but you're behind the 8 ball in terms of catch-up. And I keep hearing comments from all of you on both sides of the aisle about wasteful spending, and I'd like to hear specifically what are these wasteful spending things and how do we drag them out, kill them off, so you can allocate the money to where it's going to do good, both for the taxpayers and for businesses like ours that are looking at this as an opportunity.
She wants to feel that.
I too would like
The
to see the
finance
list.
people have the list.
I would like to see the list of wasteful spending, because 63% of our budget is codified.
Yeah.
So, less than 40% of it we have to work with to pay bills. So, yeah, I too would like to see that list. And I hear that, I've been in the legislature 17 years, and there's always someone saying, hey, we need to cut wasteful spending. Well, give me the list. Plain and simple, give me the list, tell me what it is, and let's tackle it. But, not get
What's wasteful spending to me might not be wasteful spending to other legislators. And then like I've said, I believe that we need more revenue, and that's why I voted for more revenue.
Well, the legislature has cut some wasteful spending, and one that the legislature did definitely try to do this year, passed a bill, was to eliminate to decouple the Greyhound races from the casinos. That's $15 million. You have to pass a bill. It's mandated that we hold these Greyhound races. Nobody goes to them. They're abusing animals, but it's mandated by the state of West Virginia. The legislature passed a bill. We needed to use that money. We needed that $15 million. We needed it. WVU needed it, we needed it. But it was vetoed by the governor. Courtesy patrol, $5 million not going to state road fund, going to a courtesy patrol with the head of that group that runs that, makes an outrageous salary. That's just a different issue, but there's things like that that need to be done. Some things, we need to make priorities.
Okay, Delegate Fletcher.
Yeah, I agree with what David said about what wasteful spending is in the eye of the beholder.
You don't have to tell me about wasteful spending. I live in Massachusetts. I wish I did.
For example, at WVU, it's meant that we hardly do any cleaning anymore. I mean, every agency in the state has minimized and has cut over many, many years because of that. And so I'd like to see the list too, because I think we are down to, and there probably are a few things that we could change, maybe the courtesy patrol, but the part about the eye in the beholder, the Greyhounds are 1,300 jobs in the northern panhandle. And you cut that and you really hurt an area that has been really hurt by the downturn in the steel industry. That courtesy patrol, it comes out of McDowell County. They've lost 75% of their population. They have an enormous drug problem. And, you make those cuts and you're gonna hurt the people who are, have been on welfare. And this is a welfare to work program. That's what the courtesy patrol is.
But you gotta find new sources of revenue somewhere.
Right, I think that's the answer.
Let me let Delegate Williams wrap this up for us, this conversation, and I do want to take 5 minutes to talk about an update on our local bill, and then close out the event.
I think unfortunately there's sort of a crass sense in society that the money that you get from government, you don't need that. That doesn't really matter. But I need my pet projects. So like Delegate Pethville said, it's all in the eye of the beholder, right? So I think people need to be a little more compassionate when they consider that money going to something that you might not necessarily see isn't necessarily a waste. That's a good thing because A, it's helping somebody, and perhaps that can be an investment in them and they might help you down the road as well. And when we talk about cuts, the 3 bills to my knowledge that were in the House of Delegates to make cuts, there was the Greyhound bill, $15 million, Courtesy Patrol, $5 million, and then the cutting of the Women's Commission was somewhere around $300,000. That's $21 million, let's say. Drop in the bucket compared to everything. We hear people say, go down there and make cuts, and then people who would typically be cut-minded get down there, and there's just not enough fat to cut. It's a bare enough bones budget as it is, and I would encourage legislators to stop the rhetoric that there's all kinds of cuts that we can make, because that's not contributing to the dialogue and getting to the bottom of the real problem.
Okay, hang on 1 second, Delegate Fritsch, because Senator, you wanted to say something?
Comment I make goes back to what we talked about, visualizing these people along the highway standing around. That compounds the picture to make you think that there's so much waste going on when you see all these people standing around. And that makes you think, but like you said, it's a drop in the bucket. We're out to 3 decimal points on a lot of these things where we've got problems. But the fact that we see people standing around, we think that's waste, and there's so much of it.
So if you don't know me, you know I'm a total pushover. I said Delegate Williams was going to wrap it up, but just for one minute.
I think that the House and Finance Committees have been working with the administrations to find places to cut, and we've been doing that, things that we can cut. We've been cutting. But there's some things you need legislation to pass to get at those funds that seem very wasteful. And frankly, the reality is that the coal industry has faced an attack by the federal government. There was a war on coal. The severance taxes in West Virginia are down, and the budget we have challenges. That's a reality. We need to change the way we're doing things. Things we could afford in the past, we could afford them perhaps. Maybe they were wasteful, but we could afford them. We can't afford them now. It's a new reality, and we really need to prioritize.
Okay. All right, let's shift gears. These are big problems. We know you're tackling them, and we appreciate all the work that you're doing on that. But I want to ask Eldon Callan to come up and give us a very brief update on the local bill. Tom talked about how in Morgantown, or the greater Morgantown area, we're really trying to take some local control and move it forward, because we know how hard it is for you to get everyone that represents everyone in the state to do that for us. So the local bill was something that this chamber championed over the last few years, got it passed last year, and I'd like Eldon, and I can't remember your whole title. So if you would tell us.
I'll go over real quick.
Okay, all right.
First I want to thank Jack and Ashley for moderating this session. Steve, Terry, and I were at the Rotary this morning at 7:30 talking about the same issues that you're now talking about. I want to quickly go over the local act, but it's sort of interrelated to the road referendum, as Senator Bob, you mentioned. until the call comes out, we don't know where we're going to go with it. But we were, Steve, Terry, and I started on February 1st, and as you're probably aware, the chamber has taken a very, very active role in a lot of areas. Government affairs, community and economic development is my title, so that's what my focus is, what I work on. Community, economic, and workforce development. It's not a destination, it's a journey. And that's what we need to understand. Infrastructure must be developed. How many people got here that didn't travel on the road? $1,400 in Montague County is what people are paying extra to hit potholes and avoid filled up ditches. That's what Montague County is the most expensive, according to the study, the most expensive cost for 4 roads are being paid by the people that drive in Montague County. The local act is addressing that, and it was put together with a lot of people over 4 or 5 years. And Senator Beach was one of the leaders of that local act when we got it through on the Senate side. And of course, Barbara and Dave and Cindy were, and Amy, I think you were there too. You were all there working on the local act. What we've done, starting right in February, is the referendum on this local act is geared to only during regularly scheduled election. We can't have special elections on it. So it's scheduled for either the primary or the general election. That decision will be made sometime in December. Our Transportation Committee, which designed the local act, we're focusing on it's a very good legislation because it's a positive. When the people vote on something, they'll know exactly what they're going to get. They'll know exactly what they're going to pay, and then it ends. Just that quick. We got to have a road construction plan. The road construction plan has to be approved by the county commission, has to be approved by the Department of Highways, has to be looked at by the development office and the tax office. So as you can imagine, we're moving a lot of things. And thanks to my committees and all the people that work on it, we're able to move a lot. I'm able to move a lot of things because me as a single person couldn't do that. So where we're at right now is just where Bob said. We got to wait on the governor's call to see the road program that comes out, because the local act deals with capacity. It's geared to economic development, protecting our current economic base and expanding for future expansion of our economic base. What you were talking about, Mark, that's what the local act's about. Where the bond with the chamber is very, very supportive. And I was a guest of the Contractors Association of West Virginia on their highway forum with the Department of Highways. And we talked about all the things, $2.8 billion that could be brought in that could solve our road problems now. So we're very much supportive in the bond. And I know there's waste, and those are all part of the journey. All those things have to be done, but we have to fix the roads. Because if we wait for the money to come in, trickle in, as Senator Clemens was saying, trickle in a little bit at a time, we might not need $2.8 billion to fix our roads. We might need $4.5 billion because we don't work on it for another 20, 30 years. So the reality is we've got to get this referendum through. We're working very closely. We've had the secretary and his staff up here talk to them on a regular basis. We communicate with them on a regular basis. We talk to local road people. And we're coming up with that road construction plan. And then that road construction plan for the local act, which is integrated with the bond call, will then be put on either the primary or general election next year. I'm hopeful that we can get massive support for that, because you'll know exactly what it is, what it's going to pay for, and what the goal is to be accomplished. Those are the things that on the road and infrastructure. The government affairs, as you can tell, has taken a very, very active, playing very, very active role in many, many issues. I, as you all are aware, I'm always available. You can reach me anytime. We're here to help you as well. Don't think that we just put you on a panel and say we're going to shoot darts at you. We're here to help you. So if there's issues that come up, contact us, and we'll be down there and forced to help you. So I want to. Well, they left already.
I just wanted to add one comment to that, Eldon. So
Yes.
at the end of all the hard work that's got into it, the most important thing is for everybody to go out and vote for the referendum in the fall. It's so important that as a community, keep our community and our university and our area growing and moving forward. We have to get the referendum passed for the local bill. So please, not only you vote for it, but please get out and tell your community members, your families, and your friends that they have to support that issue.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I wanted to recognize Congressman McKinley's people.
No, real quick, I know we're running up against the 10 o'clock hour. I know you're in a holding pattern because of the governor's office, but do you guys have a wish list already established?
Yes, we have. We basically are working very closely with the MPO and the DOT to see where that's going. Charlie's 68 plan is on that list too. So
Let me suggest to that. Again, thank you all so much for being here. We are at the 10 o'clock hour, and I know everyone has their day jobs to get to.